commissions on any other types of securities offerings.
Gotcha. So what about registered investment advisors? How do they come into the picture? Because we know there's a lot of registered investment advisors out there, even several that are entering the crowdfunding space. Do they need to upgrade their license to become a broker-dealer? Are they safe? What's your opinion?
So the difference between a broker-dealer and an investment advisor really comes down to what they do and who is paying them. An investment advisor is typically paid by the investor. A investment advisor is somebody who's hired by the investor to say, hey, go out and invest my money. Help me manage this money. Help me put it in places where it will be beneficial. And in order to do that, in order to take a commission from the investor, they need to be licensed as an investment advisor. That's different from a broker-dealer. A broker-dealer is typically paid by the issuer, by the person who's raising the money. And so if a RIA wants to get paid by the issuer, then yeah, they'd have to be licensed just like a broker-dealer.
Gotcha. So we have broker-dealers, we have registered investment advisors, and then we have direct issuers. So I could, as a direct issuer, I could raise money for my own entity without needing to hire a broker-dealer or using a registered investment advisor, correct?
Correct. So and this is what companies do every day, all the time. This long predates crowdfunding. If I have a company, I have a startup, I have a tech company, whatever it is, and I want to go out and raise money.
Real estate fund.
Yeah, okay, a real estate fund. I want to raise money for a real estate fund. Then I don't need to, correct. I don't need to be licensed as a broker-dealer to go out and raise that money. Now, if I'm being paid a commission, if I'm somebody that works for that real estate fund, I'm being paid a commission, then yeah, I would have to be licensed. And a lot of states actually have an exemption for those types of people that are hired just by the issuer, called issuer agents. And issuer agents can go and be licensed with the state, and they can raise, they can assist in raises for a single issuer. And there are limitations, state limitations on that. But to answer, to go back to your question, a direct, for example, a real estate fund that's raising money, they don't have to be licensed. And one thing to take a detour off the side here, a lot of those real estate funds do have to be careful because they are, one exemption for a fund is because it's a fund, they are technically managing other people's money and getting paid for it. So real estate funds, like other hedge funds, generally require that the manager be licensed as an investment advisor. And that's something I've dealt with, on a number of times.
Does someone need to be a broker-dealer if they're offering stock options?
Yeah, stock options are the same as any other security. It's the right to buy stock in the future. So yeah, absolutely. Unless it's so
if I'm a direct issuer and I'm offering stock options, no. It's starting to get thick, right? So now we're adding complications.
But if you're so I'm sorry. Let me back up on that. Brent's already trying to throw curveballs at me. So a direct issuer, a company, obviously, and I say obviously because it's done all the time. Companies can offer securities to their own stock options to their employees.
Sure.
That's under a completely separate exemption, and that allows companies to do that. I guess where I was going is if a company's trying to go out, where I thought you were going is saying if a company's trying to go out and raise money through some sort of selling stock options to investors,
yes,
then they would have to, and somebody's getting paid to facilitate those sales, then yeah, that person would have to be a broker-dealer. So.
Gotcha. And so the last one is a marketing portal, right? As a marketing portal, are you required outside of the Title III scenario, are you required to have any licensing in order to have a marketing crowdfunding portal, whether you have one project or 1,000 project or deals on your portal?
I guess, what do you mean by a marketing portal?
A marketing portal would be a marketplace portal where people are posting their deal on your portal.
Okay,
Right.
so if it's just like,
So the issuers are coming to you saying, we want you to market our deal. You post their deal on the portal. They're the issuer. The escrow's in their name. The money goes directly to them, and they're paying you a marketing fee for that service.
it's like a bulletin board.
Similar to like a bulletin board.
So, and there are several groups that are obviously doing that, and some of them are really well known and have had a lot of traction and done very well. In those groups, again, it comes down to what are they doing and how are they getting paid. Marketing portals typically are not getting paid commissions. They might be paid a listing fee, like a flat listing fee. They might be paid on a per click model or a per person that signs up. But it's not based upon, it's not a commission. It's not based upon
Money's raised
or success of the campaign, right? So
correct.
There's not a, in order to avoid registration problems in those situations, it's best not to, again, to be tied to the success of the raise or the amount that's being raised.
Within the broker dealer and RIA world, is there any distinction from a licensing perspective between real estate and other industry verticals that people entering the space should be aware of?
No, not really. I mean, a security is a security. You're selling, if you're selling interest in a real estate fund or a single real estate project, you're still selling securities, and that's not going to be any different than if you're selling securities in a operating company.
I have a question. Can a crowdfunding portal take advantage of the issuer exemption and, for example, not set up an SPV for an investment or deal? For example, company A comes onto crowdfunding portal and the portal facilitates a direct investment into company A. So I guess the question really becomes, does the SPV influence whether you need to be a broker dealer or not in the exchange of things? I think it's a matter of, this is a question that you have to hire a lawyer and ask and have the professional opinion given, because there's a lot of curveballs and what if scenarios in that question. And as I kept on scrolling to the question, it just got deeper and deeper. So I apologize to everyone listening. That was what I thought was a 2-line question became a 10-line question.
So let me, I'm going to attempt to try to parse that out. It goes back to what we were talking about before. If a company is going to, say, for example, an SPV is trying to raise money pursuant to one of these exemptions, and we'll back up a little bit. The Jobs Act, which set this whole crowdfunding ball rolling, I guess, as far as equity crowdfunding, debt crowdfunding, it has multiple parts, but when people think of crowdfunding, they typically break it down into 3 sections. And these are all, 2 of them are exemptions from registration, and one of them actually is registering that security offering. Title II is essentially accredited investor crowdfunding. It allows people to have websites, solicit, market, billboards, newspaper ads, whatever they want, to help raise capital for their company. And again, when we're talking about this, we're talking about issuers. We're talking about the companies themselves. How are they raising that capital? And the only caveat there is that the rule for that is Rule 506C, which was just an expansion on Regulation D and Rule 506. The requirement there is that all of the investors in that invest pursuant to that offering must be accredited investors. So, and then the other exemption that was introduced under the Jobs Act, Title III, was Rule 4A6, which allows issuers to raise up to $1 million from accredited and non-accredited investors. There are limitations on how much people can invest. There are limitations on how it can be done. But those are the two rules. So when people think crowdfunding, those are the two exemptions they're talking about. And then the other area, which some argue isn't necessarily crowdfunding, but it was part of the Jobs Act, is Reg A Plus, which is not an exemption from registration, but it's actually a registration of those securities. It's like a mini public offering. And so going back to the question, which I hopefully I'm going to somewhat address, if an issuer, again, this is the company trying to raise money, whether it's an SPV or an operating company, goes to a site and or enlists with a platform, and they're selling securities, they're relying on with respects to the exemption, they're relying on one of those exemptions we just talked about, either 506C or 4A6. The issuer themselves, to go out and promote their deal and sell the deal, goes back to what Brent was talking about, they would qualify as issuer or under the issuer exemption. So they wouldn't have to be registered as a broker-dealer themselves to go out and sell that deal. The platform, depending on how it's compensated, would either need to be a broker-dealer working with a broker-dealer if they're taking commissions, or if they're not taking commissions and it's just simply like Brent talked about, a marketplace, just a listing site, and they're only taking a flat fee, then they wouldn't necessarily need to be broker-dealers. Does that even come close to answer?
Very eloquent. Thank you so much. So I have a couple questions on investor amounts, not from a size of the investment, but how many investors that can participate in different offering types. So is there an investor limit, for example, for a Reg D 506C? How many investors can I have participate? With crowdfunding, as you know, with the power of the internet, we're now reaching more and more investors. We have the ability to literally have thousands and thousands of investors, and we're seeing that on the Reg A Plus deals, thousands and thousands of investors participating in a single deal. Now, never mind the practicality of having thousands of investors in every single one of your deals, but from a legal perspective, is there a Reg D limit for how many investors I can have participate in a deal?
Again, it depends on which offering, but so a 506C.
Let's say C and B.
Yeah, there are. You can have up to 2,000 investors.
2,000 investors. Perfect. And for both of those, it's the limit of 2,000.
Correct. Now, so a 506B, and we didn't talk about that, but that's the traditional private placement exemption. It's the safe harbor that the SEC provided, the safe harbor for a non-public offering. And what that typically allowed is it allowed investors, again, the same limitations, but you could have, again, you can raise unlimited amounts. And that exemption allows up to 35 non-accredited investors. However, under a 506B, you can't generally solicit, and you have to provide, if you do have non-accredited investors, the financial disclosures are amped up. You have to either have reviewed or audited financial statements. So to a lot of people, I strongly discourage people from using a 506B unless it's and having non-accredited investors in that raise, because it's just because of the financial requirements you have to comply
What
with.
about Title III in Reg A Plus? Are there any written limits to how many investors could participate in either one of those offering types?
So Reg A Plus, there aren't any limitations per se. Again, you have to get the fun part about securities laws, and I get this all the time, and I sort of talk myself into a flurry, but there's these different, I like to explain it, there's different silos of regulations you have to comply with. And most people, they all blur together. They'll say, well, what about the 100 person limitation? Or what about this? Or what
For
about
a fund,
that?
for example.
Yeah. And so, and really, so you have to kind of keep all of the regulations, the different acts in their own silo and navigate through that. And that's why this is such a, I guess, mind-boggling area of law. But
difficult course to navigate.
Yeah, thank you. So going back to your question, so under I think you asked if under Title III or Reg A Plus, if there were limits. Title III, there aren't any limits. Reg A Plus, there aren't any limits on the number of investors per se. However, you get into, if you get into Reg A Plus, and it's a Tier 2 Reg A Plus offering.
So you go up to 50 million.
Yeah, up to 50 million. Then there are certain limitations that apply to how many non-accredited investors you can have in that raise. So the answer to those questions is, again, it goes back to, it depends on what you're doing and how you're doing it. But just the across the board answer on those is no, there aren't any limitations on those two types.
Gotcha. Let's talk about a little bit blue sky laws. There's a lot of questions that I think that come from people jumping into this space, whether the registration in individual states is still required under these new guidelines, and even the old guidelines, right? Everyone's heard that the laws have changed. You know, hooray, hooray! We get it on the internet. We go to CrowdIn and get a great portal, et cetera, et cetera. But what do we still have to do at the end of the day? What's really changed? What stayed the same? What's a blue sky law? And what do I have to do about it? And where do you see people stumbling on the blue sky in the blue sky area? So kind of define it for us, and then maybe highlight some gotchas.
Okay, so blue sky, when people refer to blue sky laws, that's just they're referring to the state security laws, state requirements. Each state. So going back to our 10th grade civics class, we have federal and state laws. The SEC obviously is the governing body for the federal, with respect to federal legislation and the securities laws. And then each state will have their own separate state securities division and laws. So for under Rule 506, Regulation D, what that is that is a federal exemption from registration, but each state has their own. So in order to meet that requirement, you have to, for example, follow the federal. You have to follow the federal rules, but each state also has their own requirements as well. So that anything under a 506. Anything under Regulation D, 506C or B, you still have to comply with the state laws or the blue sky laws. And typically what that means is these are filings done under Reg D, which means you have to file a Form D with the SEC that's filed online. But each state has notice requirements that go along with that. So you have to, in every state where you've sold securities, you have to provide a notice. No, they don't have to approve that filing, but they have to be notified of it. And each state typically charges a fee associated.
So if I do a raise and I touch 5 or 10 different states, I then should expect to give notice to those 5 or 10 different states upon closure of that raise.
Yeah, if you're doing the raise under Reg D, then
Correct.
Yes, you're required to notify each of those states. And like I said, each state, there's typically a fee for it.
What's a typical fee for that? $100?
$100, $125. And so that's with respect to Title II 506C offerings. There wasn't a state preemption. You have to continue to comply with the blue sky laws, which luckily 506 or Reg D, it preempts the state's review typically or generally, but the states can still require the notice filing. Under Title III or Reg CF or 4A6, the states are preempted from that. It's a federal rule that preempts the states from reviewing those filings. So an issuer that's raising securities under 4A6, they file with the SEC, they file their Form C, and they don't have to go to each state and qualify that offering, which is one of the big benefits. Yeah, both you and I are at that conference in Las Vegas.
Yes.
And we had there were a few state regulators up there, and they said, well, no, we would still require that you qualify. And all of us security lawyers started freaking out. We all started looking at each other like, are you serious?
Yeah, everyone in the audience got a little excited because I think it was the state of Texas and I forget the other state mentioned that we don't see any difference and everyone has to file. And with the small protest, they said, well, yeah, we're wrong and you guys are right. And the panel went on as plans. So moving forward, as a couple people have texted in, what's an SPV? SPV is a special purpose vehicle. So it's an LLC or an LP or C Corp that's created to specifically raise capital for that particular asset, whether it's real estate or a business or et cetera. So many times in crowdfunding, different strategies is to create a SPV for that raise. And maybe you could expand on that a little.
Yeah, no, Brent did a great job. So yeah, SPV or SPE, special purpose entity. You'll see it used a lot in real estate investing, where they'll form this, again, special purpose entity that's formed just for the purpose of buying a piece of real estate or buying an asset. You'll see it. I know that on the equity side, for example, Angels List or Seed Invest, all of their deals, the way that they're structured is they will, if you invest in one of those deals, you're actually investing into an SPV that basically pulls all the investors, and then that entity will invest into the issuer. Which what it does in that situation is it allows it decreases or eliminates the problem of that issuer suddenly having 50 new shareholders that they have to deal with. So the use of an SPV allows you to basically have one shareholder or one equity holder in that issuer. Or with respect to real estate, it allows, rather than trying to put 50 people on title to a project, it basically allows that entity to own the asset, and the rules between the agreements between the members to be decided at that level rather than the asset level.
Each investor is then a partner in that SPV.
Correct.
Yeah. Let's tackle maybe a rabbit hole, but are you familiar with Rule 3A4 1A4, where it talks about activities test? Does that ring a bell at all? So this gentleman's asking, he sees a number of real estate portals promoting multiple investment opportunities as a direct issuer. And according to his interpretation of the rule, they should only be doing one per 12-month period. And so it looks like a conflict between what his interpretation of a given rule is and what he's seen in the marketplace. I don't know if you've seen the same thing or.
So what I think he's going with is the sort of the issuer exemption by basically saying, hey, the and this goes back to our discussion about broker dealers. If an issuer is going out and raising money for themselves, or an issuer agent's raising money, then they typically can raise money for that one entity within the 12-month period. But if they start raising money for multiple entities, then they're crossing over into broker dealer world. And I think that's
so. If I have 10 SPVs, I just learned what SPV is, and it sounds great. I could do 5 or 10 SPVs, and I start juggling multiple SPVs. You start to get into potentially a very gray or danger zone or a clear cut case of needing to be having licenses to appropriately do that without getting in trouble potentially in the future.
Correct. And you see that a lot where people will go and say, well, I'm a manager of this entity, so I can go out and raise capital for this entity. And you'll see people they'll be a manager of multiple entities that are all raising capital. And that definitely does get into a gray, if not a I don't know what you'd call it, a red area.
So interesting. That's good. So what about Title III? And on a Title III portal, the reason why people love crowdfunding is because obviously investor prohibition is over. You're able to market now via billboards, internet, market in multiple different methodologies, including the internet. And however, the geniuses that wrote the Title III gave some really interesting guidelines as it relates to what the portal gets to promote and what the issuer gets to promote as it relates to promoting a direct offer. So if we could talk a little bit about that, as far as in a Title III scenario, the portals have the ability to talk. You could promote the portal, but you can't promote the offer. Can you help us understand that a little bit better?
So, and I think you said a lot of that. You did a good job. I'll just let you keep talking. No, so with respect to a Title III I'm sorry, and I kind of throw around so Title III, Reg CF, or 4A6. I'm talking about the same thing. Reg CF is just regulation crowdfunding, and 4A6 is the actual exemption. So I guess to go back a little bit, before an issuer or before the issuer starts raising money, they can't say anything. So there's not a test the waters period where you can go out and say, hey, we're thinking about raising capital. Everybody that thinks that would want to invest, like our Facebook page or whatever.
Okay, pause.
Okay.
So you telling me, I don't even know whether I want to go Reg A Plus, Reg D, Title III. That's all Chinese to me. I go because I can post because I think I can. I go and post something online saying how many people want to buy my widget or invest in my company, and I get a huge response. Is that testing the waters? What is testing the waters before I've gone too far and now I can't raise money through Title III? Is that defined yet?
And this is where it's just like, crocodile infested waters. I think that so I'm starting a capital raise and I do that. Okay. Now I haven't shut the door on going out and raising capital. Hey, I've got 10,000 followers on Facebook, and I say, hey, would any of you guys be interested? Would anybody want to invest in our company?
10,000 closest friends and family.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. And they say, yeah, I would invest. Well, that's great. Okay. You could then go and do a capital raise under Title II, a 506C. You could go do a Reg A offering, but technically you couldn't do at that point you would be prohibited from
that would disqualify you by the letter of the law for a Title III raise.
Yeah.
And so if you want to keep the Title III raise option open, what can't you do?
You can't do what I just said. And, I guess I work with a few marketing companies in this area. And as you can imagine, they're always trying to sort of push the boundary. Yeah. And say, well, what can we do? Because then that's Fantastic. And there's been a lot of things, myself and my colleagues have had conversations with the SEC, and the SEC is in some cases just surprised us by saying, yeah, that's probably okay. But the SEC has said, hey, it's okay if you want to, be vague, or if you want to talk to, again, you want to talk to people around you in sort of a non-general solicitation way and say, hey, if we're thinking about doing this raise, do you think that it's a good idea? That's fine. That's not necessarily testing the water. Sending out a
PPM,
or sending out a blast to your Facebook followers or on Instagram saying, hey, would you be interested? That probably is. Now you could be really, there's the gray area is what activities can you do? Can you start sort of ramping up your marketing and saying, here's your chance to become part of a company. If you start ramping up before your Title III offering commences with marketing stuff, the SEC might look at that and say, hey, you're just trying to condition the market. That's not permitted.
So do you hand that off to the portal then for them to do that work so you stay clean? Is that the intent of the law?
Yeah, so the portal, the law, the way it's written is that you can't do anything before you commence your offering, which it commences with filing your Form C.
Correct.
With the SEC. So once you file your Form C, then you can go out and you can promote your offering. And going back, so that goes back to the question that you had asked 10 minutes ago before I went down that rabbit hole. So at that point, they filed their Form C, their offering's live, it's up on it's up on a platform. The portal itself can go out, and they cannot go promote an individual offering. They can promote their portal. They can say, come to our portal, and they can even promote their portal by saying, hey, we've got offerings like this. But they can't advertise or market a specific offering. The issuer can go out and say, hey, we're doing an offering. However, the issuer has to be careful because they're limited in what they can say. And there's sort of two types of advertising or marketing they can do. One is what's called a tombstone type ad, which has very limited information. Content, which is it's basically, hey, we're conducting an offering. Here's the portal where you can find more information. Here's the terms. You can say, hey, we're offering, Series B LLC interests, or we're offering, a 2-year convertible note, something like that. They can provide a little bit of information about the company itself, about the issuer themselves, and they can, and their products. Now, where it's got into gray areas is say, well, can those tombstones have a video? Or can the tombstones have graphics? And that's where you get into questions. Yeah. Well, and the SEC said, yeah, as long as it still is limited to a brief description of the company or
so the SEC is playing along. I guess it leads me to another question. What's been your experience working more closely with the SEC and FINRA through the new regulations? What's their current posture? And do you think they're going in a crowdfunding friendly manner? Are they putting up more roadblocks? What do you see coming from them as people start to work with them more? What are you seeing?
So I think, and I'm not the definitive voice on this, and perhaps some of my colleagues have had different experiences, but in my experience over the last few years, it's been the SEC. I think they want this to happen. I think they've played ball pretty well.
I've heard the same.
Where you're starting to see, and I think this makes sense, but where you're starting to see some pushback, and maybe not pushback, but where the more difficult road is with FINRA, and that's probably because they're the ones that have been tasked with regulating this and with monitoring all of this behavior. And I think, on that we can talk about that. But when you see even the registration of a portal, the SEC process. I mean, it's you file, you're good. Um, there's no review process. They really dumped the entire review process on FINRA. So FINRA's the one that's having to regulate and police this. And so you're seeing, I think that they're cooperating. They're just being careful.
Yeah.
They're not allowing.
They're not being adversarial.
No.
They're probably cautious, maybe a fair word.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense. Again, that it's, this is a new area and there's a little bit of, caution that everybody's taking as they look at this.
So kind of a phenomenon that's happening with funds and REITs, they seem to be this gravitational pull towards crowdfunding, right? It's now there's this vehicle to get my fund and REIT to the general public, and I don't know if there's an actual spike in REITs or spike in funds, but there's certainly a lot coming into the marketplace. Is there any special needs for setting up a REIT on a crowdfunding platform that should be considered by the issuer? Are there any rules? Is there anything other than a typical scenario that they should be aware of if they go, hey, I'm a fund or I'm a manager of REIT? Do the rules change for them on any level?
No, and again, it really goes. I mean, a REIT is really, I mean, it's a creation of tax law. A fund is just obviously a pooled group of investors that are come together for a specific purpose to make certain types of investments. So all of the typical securities laws that previously applied, Investment Company Act, Investment Advisor, all of those things are going to continue to apply, just as though this, the Jobs Act never came into force. All that the Jobs Act does, whether is it provides, like you said, an avenue for them to better promote their deal. I was general counsel and a managing director for a large hedge fund for about 5 years before I went back into private practice. And all the capital raising we did there was developing relationships, meeting with people in person, and so what crowdfunding does, it allows you to go out and say, here's my REIT, put it online, and it allows you to market that better. And so the rules, a lot of the rules just stay the same. Obviously you have additional disclosures and different things you have to worry about, but a lot of the rules stay the same.
Great. So here we have a question from a person who says, if I build a real estate corporation, invested $100,000 to start it, then go raise another $500,000 for a portion of the company, can I pull some cash out myself after the raise?
Yeah.
There's a curveball for you.
Yeah. Now you'd have to disclose that in your offering documents, whether it's a PPM or however you're raising that money. I would say your use of proceeds would, in your use of proceeds section, you'd have to say, $100,000 of this is going to pay the owner back. And, it sounds kind of nefarious, but it's not that uncommon. A lot of times you'll see founders will come in and they'll put some money in and then they'll put it in the form of debt, right? They'll put it in as a note. And so that note has to be repaid back. And as long as in your use of proceeds, it shows that, hey, money's going to pay the founder back, that's fine. A lot of times, but the whether it's legal and whether it will work is two different questions. I ask clients that all the time. People ask me if it's legal, and I said, yeah, it's legal, but can you market that? Our investors going to be really excited to invest in something where they know the first 100,000 is just going back to the investor. Sure. Or and you see this with salaries too. As I advise startups, I always tell them you got to be careful with the salaries, because if an investor's money is just going to pay a high salary for the CEO, that's maybe not the best use of proceeds. So
here's another change up. We have a gentleman asking, what is the difference between Airbnb taking a processing fee and a realtor agent taking a commission? Is it all about wording, or is this the same concept as crowdfunding legally?
Yeah, I don't know if this is even crowdfunding, and I'm not
So let's just think about, are you familiar with, can real estate agents get commissioned on real estate deals via crowdfunding? Like, we've been talking about issuers, we've been talking about investors, and broker dealers, and registered investment advisors, and there's, in our society, as we all know, there's this thing called a realtor, an MLS, right? So crowdfunding is not really new in that respect, but in the context of crowdfunding, is there any provisions regarding real estate agents and how they get commissioned as it relates to securities?
Brent just took that question and just made it even more complicated and more convoluted. So thanks. So I'm really going off the cuff here, but a real estate agent. So say there's a deal that's being crowdfunded, right? And so people are trying to raise money on the sale of, or to raise money to buy a project. Now on the sale, the purchase or sale of the product, a real estate agent can make a commission. On the purchase or sale of securities, a real estate agent cannot make commissions unless they're also a broker dealer. If the real estate agent, if the project was, and there's actually, it's interesting, here in our home state of Utah, there is a bill that will be introduced in the next legislative session talking about real estate crowdfunding, and that will allow, it's designed to allow realtors to actually go out and raise capital for real estate deals. And
very exciting.
Real estate commissions. I don't know. We'll see.
It's just another, it's exciting for me because obviously it's just more added value to the industry itself, right? Yeah. More people will be joining. It's the more volume of crowdfunding, the more legislation, the more rules will be around it to help everyone. Several people have asked while we've been talking about what's the cost of a legal review for my portal. If I want to start a marketing portal, what does it cost to have a legal review to make sure I'm doing it right, and that type of thing? You and I have talked before on this. Your typical costs of what you charge for, let's just say, let's make it easy. It's a crowd engine portal. How much would you charge to do a once over on it to say it gets the Marty Tate seal of approval that it was set up correctly, and by this configuration, they're obeying all the guidelines of the jurisdictions offering types they chose?
Yeah, and I think this is, we've had this discussion before. I think in that scenario, it's not going to be a lot. I mean, I think you're going to be, I don't know, $500 to $1,000 to just have somebody look over that and say, yeah, this works. I think that the important thing there is not just, you're looking at the disclaimers and you're making sure that that's right, but you're also making sure that the functionalities work. That if it's a listing, for example, if it's just a listing platform, I'd want to look at how you're getting paid. I'd want to understand
the business model.
So it's more than just, hey, let me click through a few pages and everything looks right. It's really digging down and saying, what's the business model? How are you getting paid? Let me go through and pretend like I'm an investor so I can see every step and make sure that I'm getting the right disclosures, getting the right disclaimers. That's what a review would entail. And so that's kind of.
Are you familiar with any case law around crowdfunding and or any actions the SEC or FINRA's taken with any people you've come across or even heard of in the industry? I haven't heard of anything.
No, so far not. You've seen there's been a few actions against people where there's been, and that's one of the things that I like to talk about if I'm speaking at a convention or on the topic. One of the things you get is from the skeptics, and you saw this a lot before the Jobs Act went into place, was, well, there's just going to be this huge spike in fraud. You're not seeing that at all. You've seen a few cases here and there that have been really well noted. And the interesting thing is those fraud cases were actually snuffed out by the crowd. People said, they started asking questions. So you're seeing the ability for somebody to go and commit fraud in these situations is actually dramatically decreased as compared to some guy that's going and trying to raise money from, people around his neighborhood or his church. So
Sure. So let's change gears a little. Are Reg A issuances considered private placements or public offerings? So this brings up a big question of when is something a private placement? When could I go public with it? Can I go public on Reg D? Can I go public on Reg A plus? What's the line between private placement and a public offering, and which offering types qualify for those?
So this goes back to the question to something we talked about before, where I was saying the difference between, a 506C or Title II or a 4A6 Title III. Those are exemptions from registration, so you're not registering anything. A Title IV or Reg A Plus is a registered offering, so it's like a mini public offering. And if you go through that process, one of the big differences is compared to the other two is you buy stock in or securities that are sold under Reg A Plus. They are unrestricted securities, meaning you can go and resell those securities without having to, as compared to securities under the you buy under the other the exemptions from registration. Those are restricted securities. So going to the question of being a public company, after you go through the process of a Reg A plus, you have unrestricted securities. At that point, you can go and try to list those securities on a marketplace such as the OTC, and that's something that a lot of people are talking about doing and are trying to do. The only one that I think has successfully done that has been LEO Motors through their Reg A Plus offering. And they were able to list that on the OTC and allow those shares to be traded and have a public market.
Is there anything you have to do to allow that to happen other than the filing? I know that, for example, NASDAQ charges $2 million and I think $250,000 a year to be listed on that platform. And then the OTC, I believe it's $20,000,
So you definitely have to go through a listing and in order to qualify for NASDAQ or another, stock exchange, there are qualifications on the size of the company,
reporting,
and then
auditing.
and then once you do that, then you become subject to their requirements, but also the SEC reporting requirements. Under Reg A Plus, if you file a Reg A Plus, you have ongoing reporting requirements with the SEC, but they're not 34 Act reporting requirements. So you don't have to do quite as much as you would if you were a fully reporting public company. You still have to file you still have to file regular reports, but as a reporting company, you have to file quarterly reports, annual reports, current reports. And with a company that does an offering through Reg A Plus, the requirements are less.
Great. We have a question. What would you say is a reasonable cost to set up a SPV on a Reg A Plus real estate offering? I'll answer this one because I don't think Marty touches this a lot. It's actually a crowd engine offering. We offer the ability to set up an entity and then also manage that entity. So if you'd like price on that, you're basically looking at $4,000 a year, but you could call me and I could give you more details on that. So yes, we have entity management, pre and post raise that would do all your K1s, reporting, etc.
And then from my perspective, obviously it's just going to depend, but I don't know if the question is also, what does it cost to do a Reg A Plus offering? I think you're going to be 30,000 to, on the low end of 50,000, is what I'm generally seeing. And then if you go to a large, coastal New York firm or LA firm, you're probably going to be double that.
Yeah. It's very, very regional sometimes what you pay.
Yeah.
We touched on this in the beginning of the webinar, but let's touch on it again. Does a person need to be licensed broker-dealer in order to register a platform with FINRA? And so I'm assuming they mean Title III.
Yeah. So if it's a Title III, then no, you don't. You can go through the process of becoming what we talked about, a funding portal or licensed intermediary, which is like a BD Lite, and it allows you to sell securities, receive commissions. But again, the only types of securities you can sell are securities offered under 4A6 or regulation crowdfunding. If you want to be a platform that sells securities under Reg A Plus or 506C or any other exemption, and take commissions on it, then yes, you would need to be registered as a broker dealer.
So let's do one more curveball before we close it in a few minutes. The person writes, can you comment on raising capital, debt or equity with foreign and domestic investors with foreign projects, commissions versus listing fees? Does it need to be a U.S. company? So there's obviously, if I have a U.S. portal, because I'm here, can I raise capital with foreign investors? And then do I have to have a U.S. entity, or could it be a foreign entity? And how do those relationships between foreign investors and domestic and foreign entities work?
Yeah. So, all right. So say it's and hopefully this answers your question. So say it's a U.S. We'll talk about a U.S. issuer. They could raise money from both domestic and foreign investors. Foreign investors are come in under a separate exemption called Regulation S. They receive, they can subscribe and participate in an offering here in the U.S. If it's a U.S. issuer, but there's let's say it's a foreign project, say it's a U.S. issuer, a Delaware company, but they own a project in Dubai or something, if that's even allowed under the local rules there, then, again, that's all possible. U.S. investors, foreign investors could invest in that SPV. If it is a foreign issuer, then the U.S. rules are not going to apply. You're going to have to comply with if it's a German or any European entity that's raising that capital, then you're going to have to comply with the securities laws of that jurisdiction. Does that answer the question? Or
let's say yes. Last question. In the FINRA process to register your portal, I think there's a requirement that is there any limit to dollars amount a company must have in order to be approved? 20, 50, is there a $20,000 limit, $100,000 limit? Is there a amount of money the portal must have in order to be approved for FINRA?
Yeah, so like a net worth requirement?
Maybe? Yes. Is there a net worth limit or amount to qualify for a funding portal?
No.
So I could have $0 in the bank and I could technically qualify by FINRA.
Yeah, no, $0 in the bank. You still are going to have to pay to get the process through.
Yeah, you still have dues to pay and everything else, but there's not hey, let's take a peek at the bank account before we approve it.
And there's filing fees and obviously legal fees associated with that. So starting a funding portal or a funding portal on a shoestring is not realistic. I'll just say that. Again, the process to take it through the SEC and FINRA is it's long. I would
define
say,
long. Give me a range.
3 to 6 months. I'd say 6 months to take it through. There's numerous applications. There's a lot of documentation that needs to be generated, policies and procedures, disclosure materials and so forth. So it's definitely there definitely is some barriers to entry there.
How much of that time limit is controlled by the applicant, and how much of that time limit is controlled by the SEC and FINRA? So if I have a lot of resources and a lot of motivation, and I just want to bulldoze my way through the approval process, what would be the quickest you think I could get it done?
I would still say 4 to 6 months, because a lot of it is going to be going through FINRA. I think dealing with your attorney, going through the process, the application, that's going to be, a month, 2 months. And then the rest of the time you're dealing with FINRA, and there's interviews, there's back and forth. They're going to want to be able to go through your platform, review everything. So that's definitely a process.
Got it. So thank you everyone for participating online while Marty and I have had an opportunity to chat. We'll be at this again next month, the third Thursday, and we look forward to hearing from you again. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Thank you, Marty.
Okay, thank you.